morning, dear viewers of Smart 24 TV, and all of you over there listeners. We are blessed and appreciate God for the new morning. It's the weekend, and we come always with a point this early morning, and we call upon you to be part of this show using all our media, channels, including the Twitter at Smart 24 TV at that Endeavor. With us here, we are blessed to have a good team. Dear guests, you're welcome, and straight away from the extreme end, kind of greet the viewers, then we move together.
Good morning, viewers. Good to have you here. My name is Jonas Bawazi. I am a research fellow at the Advocates Coalition for Development and Environment. In short, ACOD.
Yeah, you were doing a good work. I'm reading your literature everywhere. Yes, thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Very soon I'll join you and also make a contribution.
Thank you.
Good morning, viewers. I'm also happy to be associated with this team and to be with you this morning. My name is Albert Biamudisha. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor on Sustainable Development Goals and Head of the SDG Secretariat at the Office of the Prime Minister.
Yes, we are blessed to be with you, and you're a professor. So to
yes, academically, I do some research and have some teachings and supervise students.
Thank you,
at higher levels.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
Good morning to all our listeners. My name is Ruth Awori. I work with the Uganda Network of Young People Living with HIV as an Executive Director. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation as a young person, as a woman, but also a programmer who has been part and parcel of implementing some of these sustainable development goals.
Thank you so much. My name too is Dr. Joseph Tindeva. I come with New Vibe this morning, and we will be dealing with a discussion on how sustainable development goals will be implemented successfully in Uganda's economy. And we will be looking through these sustainable development goals, very eager to know whether we are doing the best, especially for our country, or whether we need to do much more than we've been able to achieve. Before we go forward, we will be receiving a clip that is showing us indeed an analytical view of what is happening with our sustainable development goals. This is not an animal, these are issues of action. Please stay tuned as we'll be receiving just the overview of what I'm referring as a clip that will be revealed to us. Thank you.
In 2015, when Uganda held the presidency of the UN General Assembly, 193 member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its associated 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. At the heart of the SDGs was a pledge to leave no one behind and to reach the farthest first.
During the period of the 69th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the UN member states have finally agreed on the all-important SDGs, 17 of them. The convergence of analysis and solutions, the convergence of diagnosis and prescription is a landmark in the history of mankind.
Member states all over the globe committed not only to reducing poverty, but also eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, to combat inequality, to fight climate change, to ensure gender equality, and to ensure universal access to quality healthcare and universal education, with human rights of all people at the front and center. Since the adoption of the SDGs, the government has implemented an inclusive process to ensure that the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs are owned by the people and are localized.
At the heart of the 2030 Agenda was a pledge to leave no one behind. It meant that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and targets should be met for everyone, with a particular focus on the poorest, most vulnerable, and further behind, people who indeed are often left out.
Institutional delivery of the SDGs is guided by a multi-stakeholder national SDG coordination framework, which is executed through 5 multi-stakeholders technical working groups to facilitate integration and alignment of national development frameworks to the SDGs. Production of data and statistics, financing and resource mobilization for SDGs, communication and popularization of SDGs, coordination, monitoring and reporting progress on the implementation of SDGs. In 2018, the government of Uganda, with support from the United Nations, launched the country's first national SDGs roadmap 2018-2020. This was developed to operationalize the national SDG coordination framework, which was established in 2016 at the start of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its associated 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In 2019, the government of Uganda, in partnership with the UN country team, established the Sdg Secretariat, which has not only strengthened coordination among ministries, departments and agencies, but also collaboration with the civil society organizations, the private sector, academia and the United Nations, and localization of SDGs in local governments. Following the expiration of the SDG roadmap in 2020, the government of Uganda, with support from UNDP, undertook a consultative process, developed a new SDG roadmap to guide SDG implementation from 2020-2021 to 2024-25. This SDG roadmap is aligned to the 3rd National Development Plan, which runs for the same period.
The government of Uganda has continuously instituted several reforms targeted at delivering on the implementation of the SDGs by 2030.
Since 2016, several milestones have been achieved. These include translation of the SDGs into 13 local languages, an increase in number of SDG indicators with available data from 41 in 2016 to 119 in 2022. The government is also setting up a national SDG monitoring and reporting system to enhance data analytics and dissemination. Uganda's 3rd National Development Plan is at least 90% aligned to the SDGs. In July 2020, government presented Uganda's 2nd voluntary national review report to the UN High-Level Political Forum and is scheduled to schedule the 3rd report next year in 2023. District local governments have also been continuously engaged to implement local initiatives, including local financing initiatives to support implementation of SDGs and voluntary local reviews conducted in 10 districts so far. The government continues to work with different partners and stakeholders in the quest to achieve the SDGs. In 2020, the government approved the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, which highlights strategies and contributions of the United Nations to the implementation of the 3rd National Development Plan and the SDGs up to 2025. With government working with civil society organizations on the localizations of the SDGs, several campaigns have been launched, such as Tonde Kamabega. In addition, the SDG private sector platform was launched in 2021 to mobilize the private sector players to not only support implementation but also to leverage and benefit from the SDGs. The Youth Coalition for SDGs has played a role in raising awareness about the SDGs and mobilizing young people as agents of change towards the world. The economy had registered strong recovery and was projected to grow at 6.0% in 2019-2020. The poverty level has reduced slightly from 21.4% in the 2017 to 20.3% in 2020, with a decrease in the total number of poor persons from 7.1 million to 7 million in the same period. A resilient health system that has, for instance, been able to withstand and manage the shocks of COVID-19, continued progress on gender equality and women empowerment as evinced from the women participation and representation in local governments, parliament and cabinet. Electricity access rate from 14.5% in 2015 to 28% in 2021 due to increased generation capacity and rural electrification programs as a means of accelerating efforts of increased access to clean energy. The government continues to implement poverty reduction and employment creation programs by supporting women-led businesses, youth livelihood programs and Emioga, in addition to social protection programs for the elderly. Increases in proportion of national paved roads from 80% in 2017 to 93% in 2020. Number of people covered by a mobile network by technology from 20.2 million in 2015 to 25.6 million in 2020. Although the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed sustainable development challenges, the outlook is positive. Uganda's resolve to achieve the SDGs remains unshaken. Our path to recovery from COVID-19 must and will be aligned to our SDG journey. As we continue on this collective journey, we commit to our promise to the people of Uganda and to the planet. No one will be left behind.
As government, we also recognize that more work needs to be done in order to meet the set 2030 targets. And in particular, they seek to actively involve more Ugandans in the planning, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting on SDG interventions, so that communities are not merely beneficiaries, but active participants in the process.
Welcome back, and you've been able to be part of us in what we're also learning together. We want to appreciate the Office of the Prime Minister. Professor, you are doing a good work as a technical advisor. We thank you for your contributions.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to report to the viewers that the information concerning the review about concerning the implementation of sustainable development goals, you can access it on our e-networks, including you just go and then you put SDGs, whether review report, you'll access it equally like how I accessed it. This one, the report is there. And that's why we'll be critical analyzing to look at what exactly, at the launch of the SDGs, through that gathering of the United Nations, we were happily represented by the head of the state and also the former Prime Minister. And we'll be looking at the realities that are embodied in the implementation of SDGs. Our dear guest has a lot to say. I'd like first to welcome the professor to give us more, shed light on exactly what's happening. Are we having a headway on to come out from poverty? Is there any way that we are no longer going to have hunger? It seems to be unemployment is a challenge in the country, because we are of some report of our youth who still go abroad. They are searching for, to do petty work, even not skilled labor. And also the percentage with us, our dear professor from the Office of the Prime Minister, it still reveals that 60%, 64, 70% is still, struggling of our youth with unemployment. We'll be going story by story by each goal, and we touch what matters most for us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you very much, dear viewers. The first bit you have seen was a video prepared by the Office of the Prime Minister, the Sdg Secretariat, to give you just a snapshot on what is actually happening in the government. As you are all aware, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in 2015, September 2015, and started operation around 2016. And they are supposed to run up to 2030. So that is 15 years, from 2015 to 2030. And you need to note that during that time of the adoption of the agenda, Uganda held the presidency of the General Assembly. Honorable Sam Kutesa was in New York for 2 years and was the president of the General Assembly. And it is remarkable that during that time, when the United Nations General Assembly, with all heads of state, adopting the SDGs, our president of Uganda, General Kaguta Museveni, was the chairman of the General Assembly. Meaning that now Uganda is the front runner for the SDGs. Since that time, government developed a coordination framework with two approaches, one using whole government approach and then citizenry approach. With the government approach, we have an institutional mechanism arrangement where all actors in the government and even in the non-government, the non-state actors, meet together and discuss issues to do with SDGs. So the first of all, a coordination framework was developed which brings on board all of the stakeholders. Number two, a focal point minister for sustainable development goals was appointed by the president to oversee the implementation of SDGs in Uganda and report to cabinet regularly. We have a full-fledged Sdg Secretariat which was developed by government of Uganda and the United Nations country team to support and steer the coordination architecture in the implementation of SDGs, and this is a secretariat which I head. Three, we have been able to partner and collaborate with different stakeholders because the government cannot achieve the SDGs alone, but we have partnered with different key stakeholders who are very important in the implementation of SDGs. We have signed an MOU with CSOs, the civil society organizations, and we work together as far as implementation is concerned. We are working with UN country team, all the agencies, development partners, academia, the youth, people with disabilities, elderly. Now, at least we can say with this morale we have started, and if we continue with it, we should be able to achieve the SDGs. We have, our government has also gone ahead to set up 5 technical working groups, which are the anchor, the implementation of SDGs in Uganda. These working groups, you start with planning and popularization, which is chaired by the National Planning Authority. Their responsibility is to make sure that all the national, local government strategic plans are aligned to the government framework, which is the NDP3, which should also be aligned to our Vision 2040. So National Planning Authority chairs the working group, and on board they bring other stakeholders, CSOs sit on that one, academia, private sector, when they are planning. And they should be domesticating the SDGs. And I can say that when we adopted the SDGs, we were in national, by that time we had the NDP2, and around 69% of the targets in our National Development Plan 2 were aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. But as we started developing National Development Plan 3 in 2020, now the alignment is over 90%. So, meaning that the country has tried to domesticate, but what remains is to make sure that we implement what we have domesticated, because the SDGs are implemented. And they are integrated with all the strategic plans. The second one is the data. How do we know that we are doing well or not doing very well? And you have shown us some reports which were produced, which shows how Uganda is progressing in its implementation of the goals, all the 17 goals. This one is possible because we have put a technical working group on the data aspects. And this one is chaired by Uganda Bureau of Statistics, because constitutionally they are responsible for data. Now, when we adopted the SDGs, the data points, the indicators the government was able to measure was 45 indicators. But as I speak now, we are at 119, meaning that 119 indicators have the data points which are comparable worldwide. Out of the 232 indicators which were fixed for measuring SDGs internationally, Uganda is able, the ones which are eligible for Uganda are 201 indicators. But now we are at 113, and with the working group, together with the development partners and CSOs, we are trying to make sure that in 2 years' time we should be able to measure all the 201 indicators which are comparable internationally. We also have set up another working group, which is very important, for domestic revenue collection. Domestic revenue collection, which is chaired by Minister of Finance. This working group is responsible for making sure that all of the programs, the projects, and the issues to be financed by government or other stakeholders are well organized and, of course, discussed by the working group. So they have now developed an integrated national financial framework. They have formed the steering committee, and they are trying to make sure that they involve different stakeholders in the collection of data. Then we have another one on communication and the popularization of SDGs. That working group is chaired by the Minister of ICT and National Career Guidance, and its responsibility is to popularize and communicate the implementation of SDGs, and it involves all other stakeholders I have talked about.
Thank you so much. Now, for while we like to receive that introductory, overview of what is happening with SDGs, especially the framework and the coordination, which you've ably presented. But in the next, discussion, will be critically analyzing each goal and now bring it in actual, in realities, what exactly is happening, what we've been able to do, and what we've not done. I'd like to ask, be through with our researcher from Africa. Yeah, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
What exactly is happening? And we know one of the goals it is dealing with the implementation, strengthen the means of implementation, and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. You're from the civil society, a good NGO that has been doing, visible work in this country, both in information gathering, dissemination, and also a number of activities you are doing. What exactly, where are we, especially assessing the progresses and maybe the challenges with the implementation of SDG in Ugandan economy?
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you for having us this morning. First of all, I would like to begin by appreciating the Office of the Prime Minister and government for the progress that we have so far registered. Government has been open, particularly when it comes to SDG implementation and collaborating with civil society. At the beginning of the implementation, when government produced its first national voluntary review report, civil society has also produced a shadow report, and the shadow report was critiquing what government had produced as a voluntary assessment report. And that shadow report raised a number of issues, and that also feeds into what civil society has been able to do over a period of time. And after that, there was a realization that government and civil society need to work together so that we share information, collaborate, and be able to make progress where necessary. In addition to that, civil society has also been able to participate in other interventions like localization of SDGs. There are interventions in popularizing these SDGs. We've had interventions in capacity building, in monitoring, networking and partnerships. And these are some of the things that, the value propositions that civil society has been bringing into the discussion and implementation of the SDGs in Uganda. And now this brings us to the next segment. Where are we? My colleague, the professor from the Office of the Prime Minister, has told you how far the milestones that we have achieved as a country in as far as the implementation of these SDGs are concerned. And what I need to bring to bear today is that, yes, we have made substantial progress on several indicators. We have made substantial progress in putting together the institutional framework that we require for the implementation of SDGs. We have made substantial progress in mobilizing stakeholders around the SDGs.
May you enlighten to the viewers, especially with the good work you do as ACOD, around three areas in contribution to the implementation of these SDGs that you've done most best?
As a CODE, the Advocates Coalition for Development and Environment, we have contributed to SDG 1, that is poverty reduction, through a number of research that we do and share with government, policy advocacy, implementation of certain laws that focus on issues of inclusion, advocacy for effective budget implementation, and service delivery. We have engaged at different levels to foster and enhance accountability in the implementation of government programs to ensure that the government resources that are sent down to the ordinary person are actually able to serve the ordinary person. However, we recognize that the achievements in as far as, for instance, under poverty reduction have not been as expected. We see stagnation, for instance, in poverty reduction as a result of a number of issues. With the onset or the onslaught of COVID-19, we see a reversal in poverty reduction by almost 3% as a result of COVID-19. We also see some indicators that we are not able to measure, or they are not fully applicable to our context. For instance, if we talk about life under sea, as a country we have no data that measures exactly what Uganda is doing in as far as life under sea is concerned. And that is part of the data that we lack, the 12% of the data that we lack in as far as the measurement of our performance in SDGs is concerned. Yeah.
I want to appreciate you, and please kindly you prepare to give us more insight in your review, especially dealing with Goal 15, which talks about protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of territorial ecosystems, sustainably managed forests, combat this halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. That's an area which is associated with the issues of environment.
Yes.
And also kind of take note, we also deal with the Goal 13, which is dealing with the issues of climate action. That is partly contributing to our challenges of some food, inadequate food production and so forth. Please, before we go for the break, I'd like to welcome our Executive Director for Uganda Network of Young People with HIV/AIDS, Miss Award Ruth. Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you. And the desire for our youth outside there and their parents and all Ugandans is to look at when are we going to achieve or have the realization of achieving gender equality and empower all women and girls. That's why we are happily having you here, so that you can, voice it out properly. And also looking at reduced inequalities within and among countries. It's a pleasure to have you as you also give us your overview in matters of achieving the SDGs.
Thank you very much, our listeners, for staying tuned in. First and foremost, I'll not differ from the rest of the panelists by that is being done by the government of Uganda through the Office of the Prime Minister to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals are being implemented. We do acknowledge, and I'm very happy that I've interfaced with the voluntary report on the implementation of the goals, that tremendous achievements have been registered almost in all the Sustainable Development Goals. However, we also recognize the fact that not all has been achieved, and there is still gap for us to improve as a country. One thing that I realized when I was going through the Sustainable Development Goals and through the years of engaging with them is that they are in a way interlinked. If we are failing on one, then we are very likely to fail on the other. So if we are to achieve full completion and achieving the results that we intended to see in 2015 when we are signing to these Sustainable Development Goals, then we need to be cognizant of how we are performing across the different indicators. I should say that one of the indicators that is doing very well is health, but there are also other components that affect the health and well-being of Ugandans that are falling under the different SDGs that we need to pay attention to. We are left with only 7 years almost only 7 years to the 2030 agenda. And the question for us all to reflect about is, with the registered achievements and all that still needs to be done, what can we do differently to see to it that by 2030 we are able to register our success and not having again to look at another way of achieving the goals that have not been attended to. We need to accelerate the way we are implementing these goals, engage different players, and I commend that for the OPM, because at least from the submission that is from Professor, it indicates the intentional involvement of the different players running from the CSOs, the youth, the government, the line ministries, and all that, because at the end of the day we are all contributing to the goals in one way or the other. One thing I realized is that most of the work that we do is in line with different goals, but most of us are doing it unknowingly. So as we are different players in the community, in the country, is it in health, is it in education, is it in environment, we are playing a vital role, and that will not go unrecognized.
We'd like to appreciate what you are advocating for, especially for the youth. And you pointed on the issue of ensuring healthy lives, especially, which is part of what you do,
yes,
especially, enabling the young people to live positively not with HIV, but positively to contribute to the economy of this country. And a lot is happening. We are having challenges, especially of where you talked about the effect of COVID. And even before COVID, the school dropout rate was high. And before we go into mitigating the challenge of our youth, it begins with how their social livelihoods are aligned to achieve what they are supposed to achieve. Number one, education. Then number two, having the role of the state, the role of the government to ensure that education is progressive for the young ones. And it was of a challenge. School dropout rate is high. It is still known on record, Professor. And also, the other pregnancies, before we go to help our young people to overcome HIV, it's already obvious, because now the young people, they are able to have the other pregnancies, they drop out of school, will be having really a languishing population, losing the hope for these young ones. As you do relate with government and partner, what are action points that you are spreading around, or you are implementing to ensure that we are able to be in charge of this challenge and we mitigate it?
Thank you very much. Issues to do with school dropouts, issues to do with teenage pregnancies, issues to do with the social well-being of young people are issues that are always influenced by different factors. When you look at, I'm very happy that you are alluding to the COVID-19 scenario, the school dropout rates really escalated, and this was affiliated to loss of an income source. This was alluded to high teenage pregnancy rates. But again, these high teenage pregnancy rates were because of a gap that we had faced in our health system. There was limited access to sexual reproductive health and rights services for young people in their respective communities. It's the period where we registered quite a number of sexual harassment and GBV cases among these young people. So that's why I always insist on the fact that most of the things that we do are consequences of what we have failed at as a government, or as players in the country, as civil society, as advocates, as programmers. If we are to ensure that young people stay in school, young people have good lives at the end of the day, we need to prepare these young people. Are we creating an environment where we understand the needs, the changing needs of young people? If you look at the information that we are sharing in our schools, are we considerate of the fact that times have changed, priorities have changed? A long time ago, when you would tune in on TV, you would see news and all that, but of late there is a lot of content that is running on our platforms. And have we prepared our young people on how they can take on this information in a positive way? Because at the end of the day, when young people are exposed to all this information, and the school systems where they spend most of the time are not adjusting to their needs, because time ago you would not find a child of about 12 years talking about having sex or knowing about their menstrual health, but of late you find a child as low as 10 knowing about their sexual well-being, what should they be doing, because of the different access points that they have: social media, internet, the televisions, the media itself, We have access to news tabloids that we know that are really sometimes printing out information that is kind of high-end for the children and the young people. So what we need to do is that we need to adjust as a country. If we know that the priorities of the young people have changed, are we in position? I'm very happy with the HIV sector, because at least the age of consent for HIV testing was changed. But again, when you look at other aspects of access to sexual reproductive health services, it's still, they're not disclosed in the guidelines, but still restricted in a way. This can be restricted by the way that people associate with you when you go to access these services in the health facilities. Sometimes this limits the young people from actually accessing these services. This can be seen in the way even the health workers talk to you when you're trying to say, seek for a condom because you know you're sexually active and maybe you're like 15. They'll definitely be like, what is a 15-year-old looking for a condom for? Yet in actual sense, you know that you are sexually active and you need that protection. So we need to be deliberate as a country to move with the pace that we have set for our young people in the communities, to see to it that we do not leave them behind. And again, we need to be deliberate to incorporate the economic empowerment for young people. Most of the challenges that are faced by young people are around their economic well-being. If I'm not in position to pay for a sanitary towel that I need every month, if I find a gentleman who is telling me, if you give me sex, I'll give you 10,000, and I know that 10,000 can help me afford 2 packs of sanitary towels, I'll definitely go for it. But if I'm in position to earn an income as a young person, or I'm groomed to know, or I'm prepared to know how I can address such issues, then I'm in position to negotiate on a higher end. Most times when women are exposed to gender-based violence, it's because they are dependent on their male counterparts. And they know that, okay, if I report this breadwinner of the family, then what will my family depend on? How will I sustain my children? How will I pay for the rent? But if women are in position to, and young people are in position to afford a living, a decent living, and then they're in position to buy all the health necessities that they need, because some of them actually practice unsafe sex because they cannot afford a condom. And some of them do not know where the free condoms are given, the government condoms are given. So if we are empowered economically as young people, as women, as girls, we are in position to negotiate safe sex. We are in position to make informed decisions about our well-being. We are in position to continue with education, because some of them dropped out of schools because they could not get school fees. We are in position to access healthcare systems and services that are affordable but also needed for our well-being as young people.
Wow. Our dear researcher and professor, you've heard for yourself, you don't need to go to do another research. The lack of empowerment. Accord researcher, you've heard, and because of that, vulnerability is high. Professor, coming to you before you go for the break, we realize that a lot is needed to support the young people. And as she has rightly stated it, and in our SDG, as we now begin to, to unearth these 17 SDGs, the first one is to end poverty. And the poverty, of course, I know there are some steps or indicators that reveals that we have a slight reduction of poverty rates. But yet, it is realistic that poverty is still an issue in this country. I am not going to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics rating, but for purpose of actualizing what is happening, we know in northern Uganda, below 48%, between 48 to 39% of in northern Uganda, they are living under poverty, earning $1.9 US. And it's up to 38% here in Uganda. We go to west, it's about around 55. Some of the districts, poverty is still an issue. And she has rightly stated it, that now, if our children cannot afford, their parents, they cannot afford to buy for themselves sanitary pads for the female child, it will hinder them to attain this goal, which is goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. You talked about the National Development Plan, and which feeds into the government manifesto, the ruling government manifesto. And there was a promise to provide free sanitary pads to these children. There was a promise also to help for purpose of availing, lunch for our children, so that we reduce the school dropout. Those two sub-elements, which I know this government can afford. Why is it that's not being implemented, and yet we are talking about achieving the sustainable development goals? And we are saying that we are to end hunger. We are supposed to have food and to give to the children, to these secondary schools and government schools, to provide lunch, support education.
Okay, thank you very much, dear listeners, and of course I thank Faith for having been very careful in her statements. And I want to tell the viewers that it is not only the government that can make sure all is achieved. We have to work together.
Prof, will you allow me to go for a break, and then you give us a good package and you answer very well the question?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's go for the commercial break. The professor wants to give us reasons why some of the things are not yet achieved for these goals to be realistic for us. Thank you. Stay tuned and go for the commercial break.